Hello everyone, it's Jen. Welcome back to another project for Heffy Doodle. I was in the mood to create some bright, fun spring cards, so I'm playing with the little fairies from the Absotoothly Awesome stamp set, and then I'm going to use some flowers and foliage from No Matter What, Big Bug Hugs, and the little flower from Beary, Big Heart. So those are the stamps I'm using. Let's jump into the coloring. I will also have the color map at the end of this video in case you want to see all the colors listed, as well as on the corresponding blog post over on Heffy Doodle, which will be linked below. So I'm starting off with the skin tones. I'm doing a bit of a darker skin tone for some of the fairies. I used E35 as my darkest, E34 as my midtone, and E31 as the lightest. I tend to start with my darkest markers and then move to the midtone and then the lightest. I find I have more control that way. For the darker hair here, I'm using E27 as the darkest color, E25 as my midtone, and then E35 as my lightest. And I find hair really challenging. It's one of those things that I've always sort of struggled with and continue to kind of practice. So I'm just going to do a solid hair color for this. It's not really going to matter because I'm going to put a little flower wreath or garland kind of thing, headband on my little fairies. So I did go over the hair a couple times. Now I'm working on the lighter skin tone. This is one of my favorite color combinations for a light skin tone. So I'm using E11 as the darkest, E00 as my midtone, and then E000 as the lightest, and then bringing in my R20 for the cheeks on all of my little fairies. Now for this kind of blonde hair color, I'm using E34 as my darkest, E53 as the midtone, and then to bring in some of that yellow for blonde, I'm using Y23. And I will go over all of the hair with the Y23, even though I'm leaving just a little bit of highlight there on the top of her head. Now for the wings, I'm just using one color. I'm using BG10, and I want this to be very light. So you may notice that I'm using my colorless blender, the 0 marker, and I'm laying down some of that alcohol before I bring my BG10 marker, and then I go ahead and blend that out again with the colorless blender, and that gives me a really smooth, almost transparent light blue color for the wings. Now for the yellow, I'm using two color combinations for the bright colors. So for the yellow, I'm using Y02 and Y00. For the bright pink, I'm using RV25 and RV13. So some really quick coloring here, but because I'm using a darker marker and then kind of skipping that natural midtone and going to a lighter, it still gives me that variation in color. For the purple, I'm using V25 and BV00. Now for a lot of these little flowers, I color the lightest color, then add the darkest, and I let that dry a little bit, and then I bring the darker color back into the center, and that just gives me that dark contrast for the center of the flowers. For my little watering can, I am using C3 and C1. I wanted it to be a metal watering can. And then for some of the foliage, I'm using G21 and G20. And then for the grass and the leaves on the flowers, I'm using YG03 and YG01. So again, just these two color combinations. And you can see that even with two markers, you can get that really nice kind of darker color and the lighter color. So some of those flowers are super tiny. So all you really need is the two colors. Now, I thought it would be fun to kind of camouflage or make my sentiment part of my scene card today. So I went out and cut the letters to spell hello out of my alphabet or dies, and I'm just using those same two markers in each of the color families to color up these letters. So I'm using the dark on the bottom and then going into lighter on the top to give me an ombre look here. And I think that looks really sweet. It allows me to have 2 of one color and then 1 of each of the remaining colors that I'm using in my color palette for my spring fairy card today. So here you can see those letters are all ready to go. And now I'm going to work on my background. So I recently got the new Distress Oxide color in Kitsch Flamingo. So I wanted to play around with that. So I'm going to have that on the bottom. And then I'm going to blend that out with Spun sugar so it's nice and light on the top. I'm making 2 cards today. I'm making an A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm also going to show you how I created a similar card using a Slimline. I know not everyone's into the Slimlines, and I'm kind of gravitating towards them lately in my Heffy Doodle projects because I feel like I can get so many more little images onto my cards. So I thought, why not just do 2? And you can see similar kinds of layouts for both of those sizes. I sprayed my backgrounds with some shimmer spritz, and then I cut out some grass here. This is a Trinity Stamps grass dye. I love it. It has the nice stitch detailing, and I'm using some of this gorgeous bright green cardstock from Heffy Doodle. So you can see for the background for the Slimline, I covered the entire panel. And then for the A2 size card, I'm just kind of creating a focal panel to the middle of the card. So I'm going to have quite a bit of white space on all 4 edges. So I just used that Slimline die for the grass and cut that down for my A2 size card. And now I'm going to go ahead and place all my letters here on both of the cards. So I'm mostly going to create the A2 size card with you, and then I'll just show you each of the steps as I created the Slimline as well. So I started off with adding the grass around my scene here, and then I'm going to go and add the larger pieces of the foliage. I love these little branches which have heart-shaped leaves. I think they're just so sweet. And there's 2 sizes. There's the larger one and then the smaller one here, and each facing a different direction, which I love because it just kind of helps balance out your cards. So I'm going to add these little pieces of grass next. I didn't quite know how I wanted to start with gluing everything down, whether I would glue the letters down or some of the foliage first. And so it's here where I'm kind of deciding that I'm going to glue down the bottom half of all of my letters, making sure not to add any glue towards the top. And this way I can still tuck some of the flowers and the foliage behind those letters to fill out my scene and kind of hide those letters for the sentiment within my scene. I think it's just fun to kind of have them part of the scene itself. So here's where I'm really going to start filling out all of the bottom of my card here. I cut and colored a number of the flowers. I just loved this color palette. It's so bright and pretty for spring cards. I'm so glad winter is finally over. So I'm just going to try to balance out the different colors. So I started with these heart flowers, and I'm just kind of placing those where I want them. The easiest for me was to take those bigger images first and add those down and then fill in the areas as my images got smaller. So next I started with those little round flowers. They almost remind me of Gerber daisies. And then I'll add the bunch of flowers, which I colored all of those in the yellow color. So just keeping those consistent and just tucking them behind the grass as well as behind my letters here for my sentiment. So I wanted to keep all this in just to show you the process of kind of filling in this bottom, kind of like a spring garden is what I was going for with the fairies, and of creating their magic, watering the flowers, sprinkling their fairy dust to give us beautiful spring flowers. So just kind of playing around, trying to figure out where I want these, making sure that that bottom is nice and luscious. And here's a look at the Slimline card. So next, now that I have all the larger foliage, I wanted to add some of these little single flowers from the Berry Big Heart stamp. These are the same ones that I'm going to use as the decorations of the headbands of my little fairies. So I wanted to continue those flowers down to the bottom as well. So I colored those up in all 4 of the different colors, the pink, the yellow, the blue, and the purple. And I'm going to add some of these on top of the letters, some of them kind of tucked behind, just trying to fill out the bottom of my little scene here. Once I get all these single flowers into place, I can start playing with my little spring fairies and figure out how I want them laid out to finish off my scene card. So for the A2 size card, I'm actually going to use 3 fairies. And then for the Slimline card, I'm going to use 5. So you can see with the Slimline being longer at 3.5 by 8.5, you actually are able to fit a lot more on. But I think both cards turned out just as cute. So here's one of my fairies. I'm just going to show you how I added the little flowers for their headbands on one of them. And then I went ahead and glued the other ones so they were all ready to go to create my cards. You can see here's the 3 that I'm going to use on this card. I colored them up all differently. Now to add a little bit of shimmer, I'm using my glitter pen. Well, it's kind of like a gel pen in silver. It's so pretty. I don't know if it comes across on camera, but it's just a really subtle detail, but it gives so much sparkle to the center of these flowers and just adds a really nice detail. I did add some to the wings as well. You'll see that coming up. So I'm just playing around with placement for the A2 size card. I wanted one of the fairies to have the watering cans to make it look like she's watering all the spring flowers. That is from the No Matter What stamp set. So cute. And then the little fairy to the right, I'm going to have her holding one of the heart flowers. And then I can go ahead and add my fairies with some liquid adhesive onto the top of my card here. Now you could definitely pop this up for dimension if you like your cards to have lots of dimension. I think it would be really cute to pop up the fairies as well as the letters for the sentiment. But I had a lot of fun making the sentiment part of my scene cards today. Just something a little bit different. Gonna add some black glaze pen to their eyes, and then I'm using that silver gel pen again and just adding some silver to the rest of those single flowers. And then here's where I'm outlining the bottom of the wings with that silver gel pen as well, and it really does add a lot of pretty sparkle. So I have my Slimline card done here, the bottom of it, but I thought I would show how I laid out my little fairies. I love these little spring cards, so cute. So I'm going to have 2 of the fairies on this Slimline card holding the little watering can. They were perfect to have these in their hands. And then I'm just going to start gluing them down. So just trying to fill out that space as much as possible. Making sure to have the one facing the right on the left and then the ones facing the left to the right, just to kind of balance out the card. And also having them on different levels I think helps as well. I'm going to add a little tulip to this little fairy's hand. Our little purple fairy with her blue tulip. I think it's so cute. And then just need to add the final yellow fairy, and I'm giving her a bunch of the yellow flowers as well. So for all the fairies holding the flowers in both cards, I have the different flowers so you can kind of get a sense of which look you like the best. So just using my liquid glue here, I'll get her into place and then add any final details that I need to for the Slimline card. So here's a look at both of the cards up close. So very similar layouts, just the one has the a full background on the Slimline, and then the A2 with the nice kind of white border framing those fairies, and the little scene there with the white border on each side. Adding a little bit of Nouveau shimmer to add a little bit more glitter for our spring fairy cards. There's a look at the color map. Thank you so much for joining us at Heffy Doodle. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care, everyone. Have a fantastic day. Bye.